So I guess you're all wondering why we've brought you here together. It's not to solve any kind of murder mystery. It's to unlock the mystery of the NFL draft potentially here. And we're going to talk about Penn State, Eagles, Ravens, Steelers, and some general observations. We have our cast of characters, a couple of guys from the digital content world, and Cale Ahern and Keith Schweigert. And then it's Lindsay, Alex, Andrew, and myself. So let's tackle the NFL draft and from all the local angles. And let's start, Andrew, with you. You've been on the Micah Parsons beat. Probably the biggest local story in decades, as he could be the first overall defensive player taken in the NFL draft in the first round. Talk to me about Micah, what your thoughts are there, and potentially Jason Oweh or anybody else sneaking into the first round as we talk about Thursday night first.
I got to tell you, I talked to Micah's local coaches, Calvin Everett at Harrisburg, Glenn McNamee over at Central Dauphin, and John Dennison, who's at East Pennsboro, who had him in that monster 2011 seventh grade championship game. I know the NFL scouts are drooling over that film going way back in the time machine. You know what they all say? They talk about his character. And, you know, there's been those character questions because of stuff at Penn State. All those coaches say non-issue, and they talk about how humble he was, what a great teammate he was, and his work ethic. That's what people should be focusing on with Micah Parsons. That's what they say he has had his entire life, and that's what's going to carry him through. And I think Micah Parsons is going to be a great NFL pro if what those coaches say keeps him humble at the next level. You talk about Jason Oweh, like Mike Tomlin from the Pittsburgh Steelers said, hey, it was a freak show at Penn State's pro day, and you start to see Jason Oweh start to creep up in more and more mock drafts into the late first round.
All right, so let's get to the local NFL teams. And Cale, the Eagles go first amongst those three at number 12. Satisfied with that pick? What do they lean in? I think they presumably have a new franchise quarterback. They definitely have a new head coach. So what are you thinking with the Eagles as you've taken a hold of Philly?
Talking with Locked On Eagles host Louis DiBiase, I think we were both in agreement. You expect the unexpected with Howie Roseman. It's really all up in the air, and you really don't know what's going to happen. There's talk now that they could trade up. Talk with the Panthers moving up to number 8. There's talk of possibly trading back if one of those quarterbacks would fall in a quarterback needy team like the Patriots wants to move up, possibly there as well. So it's all over the map. And then if they even stay at 12, are they going to take the player that's expected? You know, there's holes at cornerback and wide receiver, but they could take a pass rusher that someone's not expecting. They could roll with an offensive lineman that someone's not expecting. And then, of course, hey, if one of those quarterbacks does fall, does that interest them? You know, so you never know with the Eagles. You never know.
Well, that's why I say it's presumably their franchise quarterback with Jalen Hurts, and they could potentially get him a Heisman Trophy winner at wideout if he's available with Devontae Smith. Alex Cawley, let's go to the Steelers. Going to wait a little bit after the Eagles at pick number 24. If they stay put, Coach Tomlin and gang, Coach Tomlin's around. The Steelers locked him up. We know they got him. Who do you think they're going to add to the roster along with Ben Roethlisberger still?
Steelers back in the first round. Didn't have a first-round pick last year, but many people are wondering whether it's going to be offensive line or running back. Steelers have had a surge of people leave. Marquise Pouncey retires. Lampeter Strasburg grad Matt Filer heading out to Los Angeles to play for the Chargers. And Alejandro Villanueva, many people expect to sign with Baltimore a little bit later. But a lot of people are thinking this is going to be the running back pick here for the black and gold. It's kind of like the good book says, the last shall be first to take a running back in this draft. Naji Harris is the one that a lot of people have keyed in on. Cale has even picked him in the mock draft, which can be found on FOX43.com. But a lot of people love that Harris's ability to not only be a physical back there, but also be able to line up at wide receiver. He's a great receiving running back. So it looks like, from what most people are predicting, it'll be Naji Harris running back out of Alabama to also help out Big Ben back there.
So thinking offense with the Steelers, and of course, James Conner's no longer around in the backfield as well, so they could use another back. And Alabama running backs, not too shabby. All right, Lindsey Barna, the Ravens. You know, we've mentioned Baltimore, and they just always seem to win the draft, or at least one of the grades that are A's or B's. They're always up there doing a great job in the front office, and they have 2 first-round picks late as they made that trade. So talk to me about the Ravens, what you're thinking for them.
Yeah, absolutely. They're always great with the draft pick. And, you know, it seems like a really building blocks for the Ravens. They won their first playoff game since 2014. So they don't have a team that they really need to make big changes to. They just need a few players here and there. The crazy one that came about, OT Orlando Brown, which he entered wanted to enter the trade, and no one knew that he was actually going to be traded, but to a team, to the Chiefs, that are probably one of the hardest opponents against the Ravens. So that's another position that they now need to fill. Lamar's also at the end of his rookie contract. So, I mean, it's up in the air for the Ravens right now, but they really don't need a lot when it comes to the draft right now.
Yeah, and that is dangerous to give that team 2 first-round picks. Unbelievable. Okay, Keith, so you get to hear all this stuff that's going on with the local NFL teams, the Penn State guys. Let's talk about first-round observations. What are you thinking might happen, could be a surprise, or just overall what teams could really make a splash in that first round on Thursday night?
I don't really know that I'm expecting a lot of surprises, at least early on. It feels like the first maybe 4 or 5 picks are pretty much locked in. It's just maybe not the names, but the positions that are going to go. It certainly seems probable that quarterbacks are going off the board for the first 3 teams. Trevor Lawrence is the obvious consensus number 1. I don't think anybody's playing any games with that. And then it just comes down to, who do the next 2 teams prefer? Which quarterback do they like? Is it going to be Zach or Mac? You know, it really depends on what your preference is there. And then maybe Atlanta takes another one at number 4. I mean, Matt Ryan is 36. He's getting up there. They can't put that off forever, picking his eventual replacement. But most of the mock drafts I've seen and the consensus seems to be solidifying around Kyle Pitts, the tight end of Philadelphia. And I was kind of looking and hoping that the Eagles would be in contention for him at number 6 before they traded down out of that. So as far as surprises go, I think we're going to see a lot more offensive players go than you would think. You mentioned Micah Parsons maybe going as the first overall defensive pick. That might not be till around 10 or 11 before any defensive players start hearing their names get called. So we'll have to wait and see how the board unfolds. But I think, barring a curveball from the Eagles, those first dozen or so picks are going to go pretty much according to script and what the consensus has been saying. I think the surprises will be later in the first round when teams start reaching.
One of the biggest surprises may have already came, but Lindsay mentioned, was the trade from the Ravens to the Chiefs to go ahead and get Orlando Brown on KC, who was already a Super Bowl contender and each incredible year there. You mentioned the quarterbacks. My surprise is, and I just can't believe Justin Fields is not talked about in one of the top 5 players and one of the top couple of quarterbacks. If he slips to 10 in the Patriots, it's just ridiculous. It's insanity. Because if you look at production, I know Mac Jones won the national championship, but there may be 8 Alabama players taken in the first couple of days. And Justin Fields is he's got everything that you would want. He's won. He's got the arm. He's got the legs. So, and you mentioned Georgia kid. I mean, I know it didn't work out at the University of Georgia. I think that would be fascinating to be Matt Ryan's replacement in Atlanta. So maybe that's the surprise that they come up and take him with the 4th pick. We'll see there. Okay, let's go back around the horn here, gang, and talk about general observations for your area of expertise and talk about what you may see with Penn State and the Eagles, Ravens, Steelers in those first 3 days of the draft, whether it's day 2, day 3. Andrew, let's head back to you with Penn State, because I know with Penn State, there's a lot of guys that stick a long time, especially the offensive linemen. Those names have been hanging around the NFL for a while.
I just want to make one more quick observation on Micah Parsons. I'm just going to make a prediction he ends up somewhere in the NFC East. That's all I'm saying. I don't know if Kale and Keith are going to be happy. I know Alex Colley has him going to the Giants in the FOX43 mock draft. So those 2 might not be happy, but I might be picking up a G-Man jersey. Outside of that, Pat Freiermuth is going to make some team very happy. Unquestionably the second best tight end in the NFL draft. How well that shoulder, is how well the NFL teams like that, how it healed is going to depend how high he goes in that second round, but people are going to like what he brings to the table. Shaka Toney is going to fit somewhere, whether it's in a 4-3 or a 3-4 outside linebacker. And then with the raw talent, coaches always like to think they could up coach somebody. So if they think they could make them a 3-4 outside linebacker, Shaka's going to get a really good chance to do that. And you mentioned it. I'm a big fan of Michael Menet and Will Fries. They've seen a lot of football. They're smart. We've seen it with Ryan Bates sticking around in the NFL. somebody's going to get a shot. And I think somebody, at least in free agency, Stephen Gonzalez did very well at the Penn State Pro Day. He was, kind of got caught behind the 8 ball. He's a mauler. We know, AQ Shipley, he was a mauler coming out of Penn State. Maulers do well in the NFL, and I think Stephen Gonzalez is going to get a chance this year, at least in a free agent signing, knowing that he came out last year, but it was a crazy year last year.
Gonzalez is a strong dude, man. He put up 225 pounds a lot of times. You can always use a strong guy, especially in a good running game. All right, Cale, let's head to the Eagles. Days 2 and 3, those words you mentioned, that scares a lot of Eagles fans. Howie's got this.
Yeah, with 11 picks, I mean, they have a multitude of ways they can go. I think it all kind of really depends what they do in the first round. If you end up with a wide receiver, I would kind of expect a cornerback or another defensive back pretty high, maybe in the second round. And if they go cornerback in the first round and one of those top guys falls to them, I would kind of expect it to go the other way. You're looking for a receiver kind of high in the second round. With the team with as many holes as this, there's going to be a lot of ways they're going to go here. You're looking at running backs that they need to add, a linebacker, and multiple defensive backs. I wouldn't be surprised if they double dip at that position. So the Eagles have 11 picks, and I would expect them fully to use them in trades as well. And I would expect them to walk away with at least double-digit players from over the weekend, because they have many holes to fill on that roster.
Sounds like best player on the board is going to be something the Eagles are paying close attention to for sure. Cale mentioned every single position on the field except special teams, I believe. So there's a lot of needs to fill. Alex Coley, Steelers, what are you thinking?
Well, Steelers finished dead last in the run last season. If they get Harris in that first round, start working on that offensive line, obviously. They've got the second round, third round, and a pair of picks in the fourth round, so they can get good value there still. They can also sew up that defensive secondary, which is a need for them. And if not, Bud Dupree left, find another linebacker, pick up an edge rusher potentially. Steelers, they've got some needs there, nothing like overwhelmingly strong outside of running back and offensive line, but we'll be able to, Steelers have always been pretty good at finding good value on that second and third day.
Usually take 3 defensive backs at draft, it always seems like, doesn't it? All right, Lindsay, the Ravens, we mentioned not needing a whole lot, just want to keep the complementary pieces around. They want to just keep adding some talent to that roster, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. With 2 first-round picks now, you kind of have to be on your A game. It's not a random pick, let's just add this guy. Lamar, he can throw to anyone, but you need a bigger receiver, bigger targets. You only have Hollywood Brown, who's only 5'9". So you need that versatile wide receiver on offense. And now with Orlando Brown on offensive tackle being his blind side, you need a guy that's going to protect him. He can't be always running. He's going to get hurt. You need someone to protect him. But honestly, I think their number 1 pick is going to be an edge. They need to put the pressure on other defenses. And I think that's the first way to go.
All right. Sounds good. Keith. Okay. So you're going to digest all these 3 days. What are you going to come away with, do you think? What are you paying attention to, not just Thursday night, but also Friday and Saturday?
Well, as much hype as Thursday night gets in the first round, I think a lot of teams really do their best building in day 2 and day 3. So, as an Eagles fan, that's what I'm going to be looking at. They do have a lot of second and third day picks. As Cale said, they have 11 picks overall. I don't know that they're using all those picks. I think they would probably be wiser to package some of the later round picks and maybe try to work a trade where they pick up some more next year, because this is not a 1-year rebuild for the Eagles by any stretch. This is a multi-year thing. They need to hit on as many picks as they can. And they're not the only team. I mean, you look at teams like Detroit that went 5-11 last year. They have a pretty big opportunity. A lot of mocks are looking at them to pick up Jamar Chase. That's great, but what do you do in those next couple of days after that to really build out around him? And that, I think, is where the draft gets really interesting to me. I can't say that I'm going to be sitting there watching all 3 days of it necessarily, but I do enjoy watching some of those later round picks to see, that's when a lot of the wheeling and dealing really happens. And everybody gets so focused on who's going when in the first round when, the good teams really pick up and fill a lot of those roster spots in day 2 and day 3.
Well, that's where I'll give a plug to the Locked On podcast gang and their ultimate NFL draft coverage. Keith, as you mentioned, Saturday, I got a lot of yard work to do. I'm looking at a ton of weeds out here. Throw the headphones in. You can listen to the live coverage of those picks in rounds 4 through 7 for sure. And just my general observations, gang. And you know, Callista, you cracked me up with the pick about the NFC East and Micah Parsons. But that's really who you have to pay attention to outside of your teams is what are your division opponents doing in the draft? How are they preparing for those 2 games a year? You know, for the Steelers, Alex, when they face both the Ravens and the Browns and the Bengals who are building in Joe Burrow, you got to take all those defensive backs or you got to get those linebackers because those are a lot of offensive weapons coming at you. And, you know, for the Ravens, Lindsay, they always do a great job of preparing for their opponents and trying to get through that division. Even though the Steelers seem to win the division more than the Ravens always seem to be prepared for whoever they're going to face. Looking forward to seeing those Penn State guys that are out there for sure. And Micah Parsons in the NFC East, he's going to cause a lot of damage for the Eagles if he is on some other team than Philadelphia. That is for sure. Or if he somehow lands in the AFC North, whatever it may be. I mean, imagine him in a Browns jersey, right? I mean, you know, or a Bengals jersey, wreaking havoc on the Steelers and the Ravens twice a year. So look, if our viewers have made it this far into this Zoom of our NFL draft coverage, we thank you. You are a diehard for sure for joining all of us. We really have a lot of fun doing this. There's a lot of stuff up on FOX43.com that you can also digest. Kale and Alex did a mock draft, the ultimate mock draft by Locked On. Callista's been all over the Micah Parsons coverage. Lindsay, we pulled her off the dirt track so she could talk some football with us and have some fun. We really appreciate it. For Kale, Keith, Lindsay, Alex, and Andrew, I'm Todd Sadowski. Thanks a lot for joining us and for checking out our fun NFL draft coverage.